One of the biggest problems in America today, and the world in general, is energy and our consumption of it. Just in the US alone, on average, we generate about 4 to 5 trillion kilowatts of electricity, 67% of that being produced by fossil fuels. Also, in the US on average, we consume over 140 billion gallons of gasoline per year.
Americans make up only 4.5% of the world's population and yet consume nearly 20% of its energy. Our main sources of energy are electricity and gasoline, which come from fossil fuels like natural gas, coal, and petroleum. These are all non-renewable energy sources, and 90% of the energy we consume comes from them. Non-renewable energy sources take longer for the Earth to produce them than it takes for us to consume them. So once the resources are used up, they can't be used again in our lifetime. To get non-renewable energy sources like fossil fuels, we often use fracking, mining, and drilling. Fracking is a process in which fractures are created below the Earth's surface and widened by injecting chemicals in liquids at high pressure. Fracking can destroy the environment. The ground becomes weak from the fissures created in the rock. In some cases, fracking has been linked to small-scale earthquakes. Also, fracking uses a very large amount of water. About half of the electricity in America comes from coal. Mining is the main way to get coal, but mining can also be one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Coal miners are exposed to toxic dust and face the dangers of explosions at work. Mining for coal can also cause cave-ins and create underground fires that burn for decades at a time. Plus, after the mining is done, the coal is burned to produce energy. Many pollutants and toxic gases are released into the atmosphere. Drilling is the most common way to get fossil fuels like natural gases and petroleum. We turn these into electricity and gasoline. Drilling is valuable, effective, and relatively cheap, but to actually produce electricity, we have to burn these gases just like coal. Again, burning releases hazardous gases and fumes into the air that we breathe.
On oil drilling offshore now is vital so that we can bridge the gap. We can bridge the gap between imported oil, which is a national security issue as well as any other, and it will reduce the price of a barrel of oil because when people know there's a greater supply, then the cost of that will go down. That's fundamental economics. We've got to drill offshore, my friends, and we've got to do it now, and we can do it.
For drilling oil, there is always the possibility of an oil spill. If there is a problem with the drilling machinery, the oil can explode out of the well and spill into the ocean or surrounding land. Offshore spills are environmentally disastrous. Oil floats on water, so it can look like food to fish or ruin birds' feathers, so they cannot fly. One oil spill could destroy an entire ecosystem.
Compared to our main sources of energy, such as fossil fuels, alternative energy is a different story. Solar energy is a clean source of energy that has virtually no impact on the environment. Also, solar energy comes from the sun, and we will never run out of the sun's energy. The problem with solar energy is that it's expensive to install panels, and the sun doesn't shine all the time for the energy to be collected.
Why would somebody decide to go solar instead of continuing to buy their electricity from the utility company that uses coal or oil or natural gas? Is really because by installing solar on their home and taking advantage of the available incentives, they're able to actually either save money on the cost of electricity or even earn.
Geothermal energy is a form of energy that comes from the Earth's own heat. This is a clean form of energy that doesn't require any fuel or emit any harmful pollutants into the air. The only problem with this form of energy is that it uses a lot of water when mixed with heat, forming steam. Hydroelectric energy is energy produced by the flow of water. Hydroelectric energy is fairly inexpensive to harness. Dams aren't complex, and the materials needed are not difficult to obtain. There is water in rivers flowing everywhere around the world, so this energy source is available in many places. Also, the flow of the water can be controlled by the dam and its workers, so the weather or time of the year has no effect on the energy source. like it would on solar or wind energy. The problem with hydroelectric energy is that it can be damaging to the environment near the dam. The site of the dam that the water is being held in could flood the original areas, drowning ecosystems, or even flooding towns. Wind energy can be very efficient in places like the Midwest and along coast. Steady winds can provide cheap, reliable electricity. Another great advantage of wind power is that it is a clean form of energy. Wind turbines do not burn fuel or emit any pollutants into the air. The downside of wind energy is that wind is not always a steady source of energy because wind is not always flowing. Also, wind turbines could be dangerous to flying animals like bats and birds. Biomass is a renewable energy source not only because the energy in it comes from the sun, but also because biomass can regrow over a relatively short period of time compared with the hundreds of millions of years that it takes for fossil fuels to form. Through the process of photosynthesis, chlorophyll in plants captures the sun's energy by converting carbon dioxide from the air and water from the ground into carbohydrates. When these carbohydrates are burned, they turn back into carbon dioxide and water and release the energy they captured from the sun. The problem is that growing crops for biofuels requires large amounts of land that could be used for food instead of biofuels. Also, pesticides used to grow crops could pollute the air and water.
Biomass is important because we can grow it almost as quickly as we can utilize it. And to be able to produce the kind of power, let's say, that the United States has access to globally, to do that purely with fossil fuels would be completely irresponsible. And so these are kind of some of the driving factors I see for why biomass, part of some other energy mixes like solar, wind, is going to be key technologies moving forward.
Tidal energy harnesses the ocean's tides and waves to produce electricity. Some tidal energy projects use the moving tides to turn the blades of a turbine. Other projects use small dams to continually fill reservoirs at high tide and slowly release the water at low tide. Wave energy harnesses waves from the ocean, lakes, or rivers. Some wave energy projects use the same equipment that tidal energy projects do: dams and standing turbines. Other wave energy projects use equipment that floats directly on waves. The water's constant movement over and through these floating pieces of equipment turns turbines and creates electricity.
So there's pros and cons to every energy source, and that's why more than likely future solutions are going to be mixes of solar, wind, biomass, and traditional forms of fossil fuels and nuclear power.